Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Gateway to IT. In our last video, we installed the Pfsense firewall and now we'll be doing the initial configuration of the Pfsense firewall using the web interface. Just to recap, let me show you the network card configuration on both firewall, Pfsense firewall, and on my workstation from where I will be accessing the graphical user interface for the firewall. So you can see that the firewall has two interfaces. One is a bridged network. Uh, this is a bridge network which is getting the IP address from your home router, and the other one is the LAN segment, the management LAN segment that we created um, um, as per the initial part of initial configuration. So you need to make sure that your workstation needs to be on the LAN segment, the management LAN segment, to be able to communicate with the uh, firewall. Here you can see that. So as we can see right now that yes, it is on the workstation is on the management interface. So we should not have any problem. We can also see that the right now the IP configuration of this particular workstation is also of the same subnet that we have configured on the firewall. So you can see that the IP address, I've given this IP address manually in our previous video, and it is for default gateway, it is pointing to the firewall's IP address. So if I try to ping the firewall IP address from here, I should be able to ping it if there is a connectivity between the firewall and the workstation. So you can see that when I try to ping, yes, I'm able to ping it. So now we'll try to access the interface of the firewall using the using the Edge browser, and from where we are going to configure it. So let me type HTTP, and you can see the IP address popped up because we have accessed this interface in our previous video. So let me click on it. Let me provide the password, username and password. So as you remember, the default password for Pfsense is Pfsense and username is admin. So let me click on sign in. As soon as we are able to sign in, it prompts us with this EULA screen. We can click on accept. We can close this survey screen. Now it says the admin account password is set to default value. So you should actually go ahead and change this password. So let's proceed with the general setup here. So we can see that right now the host name for the Pfsense is Pfsense. So yep, I'm going to keep it as Pfsense, and the domain that I'm planning to install in the next video is named as starkindustries.com. The DNS server requires an IP address of our server for which will be hosting the DNS services. In that case, it will be our DNS server, which will be also a domain controller, as you can see in this graphic. So you can see that this particular domain controller is going to be hosting Active Directory DNS and NTP service, and I'm planning to keep the IP address of this one as 192.168.1.5, and the host name, because this DNS server belongs to the Denver network, so I'm giving it a name as den DC01. DC stands for domain controller. For DNS resolution behavior, you can see that Pfsense is by default set to use its own IP address for DNS name services. In my observation, I've seen that if we already have a domain controller which is running the DNS services, we should actually change it to the remote DNS server and ignore the local DNS to avoid any DNS name resolution issue. So I'm selecting that. I'm making this change over here. So now it comes to selecting the time zone. The time zone I'm selecting because I'm in India, so I'm going to select the Indian time zone. Let me select it, the Indian time zone, Asia. So here it is going to be Calcutta. All right, and the time server by default is time server. Pfsense uses its own time server, so but I'm going to change it to my DNS server later on once I have the domain controller up and running. So we are done on this page. We can click on save. Once we click on save, we should also change the default password. So I'm going to change the password here. So I have changed the password. I am clicking on save. So once the password is saved, we can now go back to the interface screen and see what all interface we have. We have two interfaces. One is WAN, that is the one that is the bridge network, and the other one is named as LAN. So I need to change the name so that I'm able to identify it when we have other networks configured in Pfsense. So let me change it to our default as per our plan. So I'm making it Mgmt for management network, or we can just keep it management to keep it simple. So it's going to be IPv4 static IP, and then we are going down to check if the other things are okay. So it looks like the IP address configuration is okay here. We can go ahead and click on save. Once we click on save, it saves the settings successfully. Now, in order to avoid, configuring the IP addresses on our machine manually, we can go to the DHCP server under services and configure the DHCP server on this interface, on the management interface. As you can see, we have the management interface selected. Over here, we have the management interface selected, and we have enabled the DHCP option. So once we select that option, we can go ahead and provide the range. So because as per our plan, we are starting the IP address from 40 to 240 range, just for easy remembering it easily. So we have provided the range through which the IP addresses will be assigned to the connected client. Now we need to provide the DNS server. It is going to be the IP address of our domain controller that we are going to install in our next video. Once we have done that, I'm also planning to have another domain controller, so let me give the IP address for it over here as well. Now we need to configure the gateway, because the firewall or the router Pfsense is going to be your default gateway, is going to be the default gateway for the clients connecting on the management network. So I'm going to provide the same IP address over here, which is of our Pfsense firewall. The domain name is Stark Industries, as we already discussed. This is going to be our domain name, and let's go ahead and click on save. So in my opinion, as the initial configuration for the firewall are configured um, um, as per the recommended configuration. In order to check if the configurations are correct, let me go ahead and open the network management interface, and let me go ahead and click on properties and turn it back to obtain IP address automatically. If the DHCP services are configured correctly on our Pfsense firewall, this machine should be able to get the um, IP address from the Pfsense firewall, DHCP server running on Pfsense firewall. So let me click on OK. Let's wait here for a moment. So it's now trying to uh, get the IP address from our DHCP server service, which is running on the Pfsense firewall, and if the configuration are correct. Let me check if it has got the fire IP address. As yes, you can see that it has already got the IP address over here. We can confirm it that it has got the domain name that we configured, the IP address that we configured on the Pfsense firewall DHCP service. It has also got the DHCP default gateway configuration, and the DHCP server IP address is pointing to our Pfsense firewall. We can also see the two DNS servers name we configured on the Pfsense firewall are also coming on this workstation. So from the initial setups firewall initial setup configuration, we are good. We will now be discussing installing the domain controller in our next video. So stay with me, and if you like my work, please subscribe to my channel, like and share it with your colleagues and friends who need to learn more about ID. So thank you so much.